Haha! I have tricked you. I am going live in the middle of the afternoon. Yes. So sorry that I wasn't able to go live this morning. Still trying to balance my physical practice and my astrological practice as things start to open up. However, we are going live with 8 more charts this afternoon, starting at 1:30. Hello, everybody on Instagram and Facebook joining us. So this is the Astro-Babble. This is something that I like to do, where I've collected birth dates, places, and times from you, the followers, who have lovingly donated your charts, your friends' charts, your family's charts, all with consent, in order to talk a little bit about astrology, talk about what the stars say, how to interpret them, etc., etc. It's just a really fun time. So let's crack open a fizzy water and get to analyzing these 8 charts. And unfortunately, I can't show you the charts because Facebook and Instagram won't let me screen share at the same time. Unfortunately, get on that, social media. Anyway. Okay. Let's take a peek at Lilia's chart. So Lilia's chart, she was born at 11:42 a.m. in Exeter. Let's take a peek. So we've got an ascendant in Cancer at 24 degrees. Ooh, a Sun-Saturn conjunction applying by degree at 23 degrees Aries. That's pretty intense. The moon is also 9 degrees Scorpio in the 5th. So we have, whenever we have the ruler of the chart in the 5th house, there's this association with the self and parenting and or children, especially because that moon in Scorpio is making an exact trine to the south node and the north node. We definitely have children being a major pivot point in the chart, although children themselves, really interesting topic. You know, it's going to be a prominent theme, but is it the theme that actually needs to be emphasized in the life? I'm going to say no, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that the moon is trining the south node. The south node is the area of the chart that we specifically should be moving away from. And unfortunately, in Lilia's chart, we have this lovely, I say unfortunately, but we have a lovely Venus in Pisces and a very strong Jupiter in Pisces, as well as the MC up in the 9th of spirituality, higher learning, travel, foreigners. It's not where the chart wants to go. The chart wants to go down into this north node in Virgo. The chart would like to emphasize writing and teaching and communication and being a little bit more vocal about issues that are important to Lilia. So we have, which really brings us up into the 10th house of success, which is where a lot of interesting stuff is happening. We have in Lilia's chart the Mercury in Aries retrograde ruling that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. Whenever we have Mercury retrograde ruling the 3rd house of communication, or any Mercury retrograde in the chart, one thing that I always remind clients is that, you know, speech impediments, issues talking in front of large groups, specifically having trouble with your words, going to be a theme throughout the life. Always make sure that you invest in a good spell check software, that you send emails to people to proofread before you actually send them to the intended party. Script out your life is a good way to say it. Like, if you want to have an important conversation with somebody, write it down, activate that Mercury principle so that you're not getting bogged down by the retrograde in the chart. But because we have a relationship between the 10th house of success and the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, I really would like to see a lot more public speaking happen. I would like to see a lot more poetry, writing, especially poetry and writing that is related to large groups or humanitarian efforts, because there is a fun relationship between Mars and Taurus in the 11th and that Mercury and Aries in the 10th. Probably besides the Venus in Pisces and Jupiter in Pisces, which we can say are negatively affected by the presence of the South Node, we have in this chart the Cazimi of Saturn in Aries, as well as the Sun in Aries up in the 10th. There's going to be a love-hate relationship with this idea of fame, but it is something that will be very important to examine in the chart. Because the Sun is exalted in Aries, and is in the 10th house of success, we find that there is a natural radiance to this chart and this person. We find that the qualities that would be bestowed by the sun, like self-esteem, like a natural charisma, are very, very powerful in this chart. But to have Saturn and Aries in the heart of the sun at the same time means that there is this shadow side to it. There is this fierceness, there is this strictness, there is this restriction in the chart when it comes to fame that we would need to remediate ever so wisely in order to make sure that fame doesn't run out of control, especially in the verbal, the writing, the teaching department, that things aren't. One thing that I've seen in charts before, especially with this Mercury retrograde in the 10th, is being famous for saying the wrong thing is a good way to say it. So we need to make sure that this chart embraces the talent of the 3rd house of writing, but also that there is a lot of reflection beforehand, which I think, putting the moon in Scorpio period ruling the chart is going to give a very reflective and intuitive tendency to the chart. However, we do have a lot of crutching in the chart when it comes to Venus and Jupiter conjoin the South Node, and that being a major pivot point for the chart as well. So creating this fame dynamic in the chart is a little bit tricky, a little bit more complicated than it originally seems as we continue to investigate the chart and sink deeper into the mysteries, especially with that there's a Pluto in Sag retrograde in the 6th house of work, making a square to that Venus and Pisces. That's a really interesting dynamic that again shows that the paths and the routes that would be natural are not the easiest nor the most appropriate for Lilia to take throughout the life, and that's something that needs to be respected. Okie dokie. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, depending on where you're at. I cannot do a reading without the birth time. I need that birth time. I can do one privately, like if you wanted to work one-on-one, and we actually do what's known as chart remediation. So we get into a chart with a approximate or supposed birth time, and we start to adjust or rectify the chart. Yes, we're getting lots of fun comments on Facebook at the moment. What's up with Cancerians at the moment? Grumpy much? That's a totally subjective experience, Laurel. I'm personally a double Cancer, and I don't feel grumpy in the slightest. However, we do have a lot happening in the sky right now. I posted about it this morning on Facebook and Instagram, as well as TikTok. The idea of the full moon today with the eclipse being squared by Mars and Pisces, not great, period. So we just need to be aware of that. But it's not all Cancers. They might just have strong Gemini, Sag, or Pisces placements because that mutable axis is starting to get really, really hit and triggered by the full moon. So thanks, Laurel, for that comment. But I resent the mark about Cancers. We're not all moody. We are moody. We're just not all moody right now because the axis isn't affecting us because we're cardinal. At least from a sun sign perspective, but astrology is more than the sun sign, which this chart will teach us beautifully. Segue into Jessie's chart. So Jessie's chart starts with an Aries ascendant, making Mars the ruler of her chart. So we have this very interesting choice. We have another writing teaching influence in the chart. However, there is a little bit of an issue here because the ruler of the chart, Mars, in Gemini, is this time officially conjoining the South Node within 1 degree. Mars at 26 Gemini, South Node at 27 Gemini. That's pretty damn close, especially with the South Node being moving backwards at the time of the birth. So we have that. Whenever we see the Lord of the chart conjoin the South Node, there's a big personality suck in the chart. Wherever we want the Lord of the charts, the prominent planet that rules the ascendant, to be placed in a way that is exalting, that is benefic to the life, is a good way to say it. And Mars isn't bad in Gemini, but Mars can join the South Node, which again is that point in the chart that really depletes energy, that tends to make things held back and restricted. It is a very Saturnian energy, a very kind of Shiva-esque energy that kind of strips the Mars of all of his martial potency, really, in the third house. So again, we have this idea of potential writing, teaching, speaking issues, but that is a major theme in the chart that needs to be overcome. And I like where this chart has placed some remediating factors as well. They're not ideal, but they're correct for how I would want to see somebody getting through this situation. We have this North Node in Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter in the 6th. And I think that that's absolutely beautiful, because the North Node represents where we're striving towards in the chart. And for the North Node to be in the 9th of higher learning, we have this elevation into teaching at the college level, to traveling abroad, to opening up spiritual dimensions that will help to mitigate this chart ruler conjoining the South Node, as well as Jupiter being in Virgo, a very detail-oriented sign in the 6th house of work. I think that there's a really great opportunity to work in the scholastic system, to travel and or work abroad, and for this chart specifically to not be hindered as much by weaknesses, but again, the weaknesses are still present, so we just need to be super careful of that Mars placement conjoin the South Node, and recognize that speech issues and feeling uncomfortable with that third house topic is going to be part of the life. I do think that there are going to be very supportive and focused friends as well. We do have this Saturn in Aquarius, although Saturn in Aquarius is retrograde. I think that this is very much the scholastic hyper-focused archetype that we see a lot in collegiate settings. Not necessarily helpful all the time, but that hyper-focused and slightly spectrum-y vibe of Aquarius, I think, will be very helpful to remind Jesse that, hey, you think that you can be great at something right out of the gate, and although in some people that might be the case, in your chart it's definitely not. So how do we remediate something that's not immediately good or perfect? We work on it, yeah? And the friends embodied by this Saturn and Aquarius retrograde in the 11th are the perfect example of somebody who is literally devoted to a craft or an idea and honing that skill, and that's passed on to Jessie through her association with them as friends, which I enjoy very much. Yeah, I think one of the interesting twists of this chart is we do have the moon in Capricorn up in the 10th. The moon is obviously not happy in Capricorn, opposing its natal sign of Cancer. However, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in this middle decan of Capricorn, because we have Uranus retrograde, Neptune retrograde, and the moon retrograde all within that 10-degree space in the 10th house, being ruled by that Saturn in Aquarius retrograde from the 11th. So I think that one of the things that Jessie's heart kind of speaks towards, and one of the things that she'll actually be known for down the road as her life continues to form, is this idea of social endeavors and working with large groups, and potentially working in humanitarian or philanthropic fields. Especially halfway through the life, as that Pluto in Sagittarius starts to ripen. Wouldn't surprise me if there was also this idea of inheritance coming down the pipeline for Jessie, which she would then donate or use as a platform for community development, because that Mars in the third house of also neighbors and communities is very much ruling that Pluto from the 8th. Oh, Jessie, my darling, we have this lovely Venus in Libra, absolutely adorable Venus in Libra in the 7th. Your partner is going to be so pretty, so artsy, so Libran. Unfortunately, they won't be able to make a decision to save their life, but there will be this natural glow to the partner, and you're very much attracted to, again, that social justice warrior archetype of Venus and Libra, always seeking fairness, and always up for a good debate as well. But what I said before about, the sun sign not necessarily being the end-all be-all of the chart, this is a perfect example of that, because we have the sun in Virgo, so technically Jessie is a Virgo. She has a lot of Virgoian tendencies because she has Mercury in Virgo, Sun in Virgo, Jupiter in Virgo, all in the 6th house of work. So she's very detail-oriented, very much a workaholic and all that jazz. But she also has this Aries ascendant and this Capricorn moon, which gives her facets to the personality that are a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more hard, that are a little bit denser, a little bit more, in some ways, initiatory, and more of a leadership quality with the cardinal signs, as opposed to Virgo, who tends to, left to her own devices, would just kind of sink into the background and be fine cleaning up other people's messes. We have this moon in Capricorn ruled by the Saturn in the 11th, and this Aries ascendant ruled by Mars in the 3rd, where we have this need to engage in outreach and to speak up and to be heard and to allow these cardinal placements to really vent themselves, and the supportive spouse who's kind of in the background, as well as all the work stuff that's done behind the scenes, is a part of the chart. But if we were to just say, oh, Jessie's a Virgo sun, that means that she's this. Yeah, it's not about that. It's about looking at the chart as a whole to understand the life. Excellent. Yes, lots of stuff. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Normally I do this at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time in the morning, but I'm throwing y'all a curveball today. But we still have our 8 charts. Let's move on to chart number 3. So we have Estella. Estella was born at 8:45 a.m. in Barberton. Let's take a peek. This south node is hitting you all hard today. So we have the ascendant in Aquarius, Aquarius, with the south node in Aquarius as well in the 1st house of self. So again, whenever the south node is in a particular house, this is the energy suck of the chart. This is the place in the chart that tends to be, that tends to lose the most energy, that tends to be where somebody has already been, not where they're going. It tends to be just a negative influence overall. To have that in the 1st house of self does bring a drain to the personality. However, there is mitigation here, very strong mitigation here in Estella's chart, because she has a lovely Hail Mary saving grace in the 9th. She's got, ruling the chart, ladies and gentlemen, a 9-degree Saturn in Libra, which is the sign of his exaltation, conjoining Jupiter in Libra at 9 degrees. That is how you remediate, ladies and gentlemen. That is awesome. I love that in the chart, especially for all of this to be in the 9th house of spirituality, higher education, travel, foreigners. This is obviously somebody who's very, very spiritually inclined, who is very knowledgeable. Y'all laughed at this a couple days ago, but just the idea that this person is cultured like Greek yogurt. Somebody who just has a lot of wisdom and life experience far beyond their years, because Saturn just bestows that gift anyway. But despite the south node being there, we still have this really strong Saturn placement conjoined Jupiter, the greater benefic, in Libra in the 9th. Pluto is also here, so these gifts, these intuitive gifts, these psychic gifts, these spiritual blessings, this knowledge of travel and foreigners and worldliness that the 9th house bestows, the seeking for truth, will only mature and ripen as the life goes on, which I think is really, really beautiful. We do have issues in other parts of the chart, though, so let's move on to the not so kind pieces. We do have the sun in Capricorn in the 12th house of karmic healing, but also jails, hospitals, hidden enemies, ruling the north node in the 7th. So whenever we see the 12th and the 7th on a lower expression of the octave placement, it's not necessarily an ideal aspect for finding partners who are who are helpful. It often indicates spouses or relationship partners that need a lot of healing. Estella is attracted to people who are generally broken in the relationship department, but I think that's why she placed her North Node here in the 7th, because this time she's here to learn what it means to be in a relationship, what it means to be in a team, to be a team player, to have somebody else that she can rely on, but also overcome all these placements in Capricorn in the 12th. She has Mars in Capricorn, as well as Mercury in Capricorn in the 12th house. She's naturally going to find people who have this sense of stubbornness and compromised will, and seek to, through her own exaltation, bring them healing. And I think that there's nobility to that. I also think that that is a trap. When we think of what an ideal partnership means, an ideal partnership is when two people come together for mutual growth and understanding. But in this chart, it seems like Estella is naturally drawn towards her being in favor in the relationship, and her being the one growing, and her needing to pull up or bolster up or remediate somebody else and pull them out of their bad situation, which is not necessarily ideal for an even relationship. And that's on North Node in the 7th, is learning all about that space this go around. But we do have some tricky placements with that. I really enjoy this Jupiter in Libra in mutual reception with Venus and Sag in the 11th. I think that this means that friends are far more supportive than lovers, Estella. Let me tell you that in your chart. Like the idea of having a man or having a woman or having a partner of whatever identification they choose in your life, like just know that the friends that you keep have a blessing about them that is far superior to anything that your spouse will carry. To have a mutual reception between the benefics in a chart, especially to have them in the 11th house of friendships and the 9th house of spirituality and higher learning, like these friends of yours, I really don't think you understand how powerful that connection is and how beautiful and helpful and delicious it is. Because we also have this Neptune in Sag in the 11th, and it's direct and it's ruled by Jupiter, and it's really in a great spot as far as Neptune goes, because it really allows these people in your life to help soften your edges and really come to your rescue and remind you to always stay positive. And they're just this pixie energy that comes forward and just kind of dashes you with magical dust, and you're like, wow, everything's better again. Like that's the essence of your friendship house being in such beautiful synastry with your 9th house where you've placed your chart ruler. This Mars in Capricorn is ruling the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, and the 10th house of fame from the 12th. I think that at some point you should publish regarding your own healing journey, and the healing journey that you've helped to facilitate through others, especially in regards to mediumship. I think that from a work perspective, you do very well working with the dead. I think that you would also do very well in the financial world, the financial sector, of you working with taxes, estates, and other people's money. That would be an excellent place for you to find some of your Virgo moon traits coming forward of organization, and some of that Aquarius kind of hyper-focus coming through the chart. Excellent. So that's Estella's chart. Thank you, Estella, for donating to science. Yes. Thank you for asking. Yes, if you would like to donate your chart, please feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. That is what I need in order to add you to the list, and I do need more names. So for everybody watching, please reach out to your friends, family who are into astrology, and if they'd like their chart featured, I just need birth date, place, and exact birth time. In order to feature you, private message me. Do not post that in the comments for privacy. Okay. So that is chart number 3. Let's go on to chart number 4, which is Belle. So Belle was born 9 p.m. in Johannesburg. Let's take a peek. Okay. Okay. So Pisces ascendant with Jupiter and Libra in the 8th can join. Ladies and gentlemen, this south node, the volume of this south node in this bus today is astronomical. I can't get over it. Another chart ruler can join the south node, this time within 5 degrees, but still, to have Jupiter and Libra in the 8th attached to the south node, there's a sense of not okayness there when it comes to personal power being sacrificed. However, we do have a certain flair in this chart for those same mediumship qualities that we saw in the last one. Uranus in Pisces, very close to the ascendant, indicates a lot of unpredictability in the personality, a lot of spiritual short-circuiting is a good way to say it, but also from a physical standpoint, we need to be very aware of the health significations in this chart. Having Uranus and Pisces conjoin the ascendant in the house of the body is going to be very tricky for the immune system. The immune system may be hyperactive, or there may be chronic immune issues that come to the surface for no reason. We also have Saturn in Leo co-present with Venus and Mercury in Leo in the 6th house of health. So there's a lot to do with the nervous system in general. There's a lot to do with the spine and the circulatory system. We just need to be very aware that these are not necessarily ideal medical placements. I do think that in addition to the 8th house representing potential mediumship qualities with the ruler of the chart there conjoin the south node, the idea of Mars and Aries conjoin the north, or close to the north node, in the 2nd house of finance is absolutely powerful. I think that money would be an excellent arena for this chart to succeed in, especially because that Mars in Aries is making a trine to Venus and Leo in the 6th. I think that that's just a synastry and a power that this chart holds. Because again, the chart ruler is in the 8th house of death, but the 8th house also represents business topics like taxes, like estates, like investments or other people's money. And to have Mars and Aries in his proper sign here conjoin the north node, conjoin within 10 degrees. So very, very loose, not even a conjunction, but close enough by sign in the 2nd house of finance. I think that this would be an excellent career move to stay in the financial sector. Let's see. Yeah, and also that Jupiter in Libra is ruling the 10th house of success from the 8th. Like there's a very strong entrepreneurship flair and business acumen in this chart, which I think is really nice. We do have the moon at 3 degrees Aquarius, co-present with Neptune retrograde in Aquarius in the 12th. It does seem to me like the emotions are going to be one of the hidden parts of the chart that needs to be unpacked rather carefully. The idea of when things get overloaded, turning towards apathy as a defense mechanism is very, very present with that placement. I'm not really a fan of that because we know that from an emotional standpoint, just turning off the emotions isn't enough. We actually need to not just keep them on, but sort through them consciously with presence. Yeah, and that's something that's kind of difficult to do with Uranus and Pisces right on the ascendant because everything feels so unpredictable, and especially with the Sun in Cancer in the 5th too. Like there's this watery energy that's pervading the chart that, if unharnessed and if just left to its own devices, can both drown the native, but also make it very easy to say, you know what, I'm just going to decide to be this robot and not tap into the emotional aspects of my sense of self, and I'd rather just everything be black and white for 2 seconds. But you know that can be a slippery slope when it comes to shutting down the nervous system that way, creating deeper problems by not processing anything related to trauma or stress. Let's see what else. That's interesting. Yeah, in regards to the career stuff as well, you know, money would be an excellent place for Belle to navigate astrologically, but there's also this connection between the sun in the fifth house of children ruling the sixth house of work. And I think that there's also this mothering, nurturing instinct in Belle's chart that I think is really fascinating. And it wouldn't surprise me if, from a financial perspective, she worked a lot with college fund investing or working on recovering financials for children in the foster care system, and or developing financial information for children in any way, shape, or form because of that connection to the fifth house. But I think the big thing in the chart is just understanding that there is a short circuit medically in the chart that needs to potentially be addressed in the immune system, and then also just in the emotional state with this moon in Aquarius. We need to find a little bit more sanity and a little bit less apathy in the chart. Excellent. Okay, so we have one. That is actually chart number 4, so as a reminder, kind of halfway through, if you would like to submit your charts, just send your birth date, place an exact birth time to me via private message. All of these live streams are recorded, so you don't need to be watching in order to get the information. I post these on YouTube as well, so you can check out the YouTube channel, and if you would like to work one-on-one with me or take some astrology classes, you can always find my online school and my consultation information on my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Okay, let's work on chart number 5. We have Orion. Orion was born 2 a.m. in Johannesburg. Let's take a peek. Uranus can join the ascendant again. How funny. 2 Uranian ascendants. This time the Uranus ascendant is much better placed. We have Uranus in its secondary ruled sign of Aquarius, within 1 degree of the ascendant. Yes, Neptune is here in Aquarius, but it's far enough from the ascendant. It does give some of that really nice telepathic, psychic energy that a Neptune in Aquarius would give. However, it's not creating the ascendant muddiness that Uranus in Pisces was doing. Instead, in this chart, we have Uranus conjoin the ascendant, and it's still going to give us that electrical short-circuiting of the charts, but we do find it to be a little bit more manageable. And as I say that, we see in the 5th house of creativity, the moon in Gemini conjoined by exact degree Mars. So Mars in Gemini is conjoining the moon in Gemini. That is not okay. So a moon in Gemini is naturally going to be known for its emotional extremes. It's going to be known as an air sign to be very emotionally windy, would be a good way to say it, moving from, hyper excited to hyper depressed, and just every extreme in between the two. However, to have Mars in Gemini right on top of the moon in the 5th house, we have this pileup of potential over fieriness in the emotions. This could be anger. This could be a lot of kind of spectrum ADD, ADHD, where the emotions are turning over so fast, and they're so flamboyant, and they're so energized, both with this Uranus and this Mars together in these air signs. Oh God, darn it! And the Sun in Aries in the 3rd, what's funny, Orion, is that you literally cannot get your words out fast enough. And that's both a blessing and a curse. And let me tell you that it's going to be so interesting to watch you grow up, because you have so much creative energy, and you have so much of an ability to speak the truth. You have zero filter when it comes to your communication style, and you can be very aggressive. And we do need to watch that and make sure that you're not ticking people off because you're so expressive. But at the same time, when harnessed, if harnessed correctly, your ability to become a modern-day Prometheus is very, very strong, because you have that Aquarius influence in your ascendant. You're able to take that wisdom from the universe, pull it down, and let it channel through your speaking, your writing, your teaching. And I think that that's absolutely beautiful. However, that is tricky. It'll become a lot easier once you hit 30 with that first Saturn return, because we do have Saturn in Gemini here in the 5th house of creativity. The North Node is also here, so you becoming a parent, that's something that's going to be kind of the goal, especially because that North Node in Gemini is being ruled by Mercury in Taurus from the 4th house. Really, really awesome family life, by the way. Just as an FYI, Venus and Taurus in the 4th, very supportive. Although they tend to be a little bit stubborn at times. There is this butting heads that does occur with a Mercury and Taurus in the 4th house of family. But to have Venus here, there is this unconditional love that's present in the family dynamic that you really feel like your safe space is very much in the home. And I think that that's something like you'll always have a place in the nest is a good way to say it. Because this Venus and Taurus is just so wonderful in the 4th house of family. Let's see, we have Jupiter in Cancer in the 6th, always being blessed with work opportunities. That's something that we all kind of want in the chart. Jupiter in Cancer is very much it's a great sign of a manager. And I think part of that is kind of your Aquarius tendencies, that hyper-focus, that hyper-vigilance. You're constantly thinking about 20 things at once with that Mars-Moon-Gemini conjunction, and that natural leadership quality of an Aries sun, all coming together backed by a Jupiter in Cancer, and we have the makings of an ideal manager, somebody who is both compassionate and caring and fiercely protective of employees, but also somebody who's constantly thinking about the business side of the equation. I think that's lovely. Let's see, what else? I really want you to understand that although a lot of people, Orion, want to make friends, your chart is not necessarily as supportive of friendships. Friendships are draining, in your opinion. Friendships are sacrificing in terms of work. Like, yes, you can have work friends, but otherwise, we have this Pluto and Sag here conjoin the South Node, which for the first 50 years of life, friends are a distraction. And also as people start to mature, friends can potentially be like really dangerous, because not only will they derail you as a person, but they'll also be in the process of derailing themselves, and you can't really sacrifice your personal growth to help somebody out because you're so invested in growing yourself. And I think that that's a difficult situation for you to look at and be like, I'm just really not a friendship person. Like, I don't enjoy having people around me all the time. Like, it's gross. Like, why would I want to be surrounded by other humans that I'm not actively trying to get to do something from a management perspective? Like, they're pawns on my chessboard. They're not people that I actually want to spend time with. Like, Prometheus is that archetype that brings fire to the humans, but does not really, like, chill at the campfire with the humans and enjoy. It's this otherworldly energy that you have in the chart, Orion, that I think needs to be respected, and I don't think that you should be so worried about not having a large social circle until about halfway through the life. Okay. Cool. So that is chart number 5. Let's move to Tyler. So Tyler is chart number 6. We have Tyler born at 9:55 a.m. in Tulsa. Ladies and gentlemen, I am forever grateful for the opportunity to read your charts. And when I tell you that the synchronicities that arise because of these chart formations, I'm literally going off a list here. Okay? I ask you guys to submit things. I put you on a list based on the order in which I get the request to be put on the list, and I have no control over when you guys show up other than your own volition and when you see me and the synchronicity of the universe. This South Node issue this time around is something that we need to talk about. The South Node being conjoined these major placements in almost all of these charts that we've talked about today is absolutely ridiculous. Tyler, my love, my darling, you've decided to put your South Node right on your ascendant. Ascendant's at 13 degrees of Gemini, South Node is at 14 degrees of Gemini. It's it's ridiculous. So echoing all of the sentiments of the previous charts, the idea of the south node being the energy stock of our chart. The south node north node axis is what's known as the ecliptic. It's where the eclipses took place the year that you were born. And for you to put one of those eclipse markers on a major personal identifier like the ascendant really tells me that there's some deliberate choices in your charts that are somewhat questionable, but also very, 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 very powerful. Yeah, and you've decided to compromise your personality right out of the gate. Putting the south node on the ascendant is like saying, you know what, I'm going to take all of this ego that I would normally have and all of this self-esteem that I would normally have, and I'm going to put it over where I can't get it, and I'm just going to flush it down the toilet. Yeah, and I can see why you did that, honestly, because you've got this sun in Aries, in the first decan of Aries at 4 degrees in the 11th house of friendships. Honey, you ooze charisma. You eat charisma for breakfast. Like, it's crazy how charismatic you are. To have the moon in Aries, Venus retrograde in Aries, which we'll get to, that's not ideal, but to have the sun in Aries in the 11th house, like there's this already overabundant sense of self-esteem, and I think that if you didn't kind of check yourself, you would definitely wreck yourself from that perspective. But we do have a really interesting dynamic with your chart, because the lord of your chart, Mercury, is in Pisces, the sign of his detriment. Pretty much the worst sign that you could put the lord of your chart in. Mercury does not like to be in Pisces. Mercury is placed in the 10th of success, though. So I think one of the things that you need to be aware of is you've decided to come into this life with this diluted sense of success. Success means different things to different people, Tyler. And I would highly encourage you to understand that you being a millionaire and riding around on yachts all day, that might be a luxurious ideal of what it means to be successful. Yeah. But when we look at what it means to be successful in your chart, it means having a relationship with a family. Yeah. And let me be very clear with that, because this Mercury in Pisces in the 10th is being ruled by this Jupiter in Libra in the 5th of parenting and children. Like, you've decided this time around that it's not the fancy cars and it's not the boatloads of cash. It's about whether or not you can actually make a life, not just make a living. And I think that that's a smart choice. But there is this side of you that wants to perform. There is this side of you that wants to be recognized. There is this side of you that wants to be very noticed. And I think that all Aries really wants to do is to prove themselves and to prove themselves worthy. And I think this Venus in Aries retrograde in the 11th is powerful, because what you're going to notice throughout the life is you will constantly meet friends, specifically, who are unhappy because they've achieved what they set out to achieve. And they're like, I've literally compromised myself to do it. All of the Venusian things, all of the abundance, all of the love, all of the things I thought I wanted, are in Aries retrograde. Like, they're not what I thought they were at all. In fact, I've sacrificed what I view as my life, my livelihood, my energy, in order to get here, and I'm terribly dissatisfied with it. And I think that in your chart, we're really looking at making things simpler, making things more streamlined. It's definitely not about the money in your chart. And in fact, there will be a lot of great opportunities for your friends and your peers and your social groups to give you money and support your endeavors, because there's this mutual reception between the moon in Aries and Mars in Cancer in the 11th and the 2nd. So connecting your friends to your financial wellness, and them supporting you financially is big stuff. Like, they'll be there because they can't wait to get rid of the wealth that kind of poisoned their life. And that's just a thing. And in fact, it's interesting because this Pluto in Scorpio retrograde in the 6th, like, a lot of your jobs and a lot of your work environments will be toxic. And I think that part of it is because, again, you've put the North Node you put the North Node in the 7th and this Jupiter in Libra in the 5th, and it's like the family takes priority, the relationship takes priority, and you're working for a job, and there's this vitriol almost of like, why do I have to work for money? And I think the short answer to that is because you're not just working, you're learning. Yeah, that's what a lot of people forget about trades and professions and jobs is if you enter a job, you're being trained to do that job, which is a marketable skill. You're not just showing up for a paycheck. You're actually gaining experience, like you're leveling up, and that's what the Saturn in the 9th of higher learning goes towards. You'd actually do very well in a scholastic environment, Tyler. In fact, I would encourage you to, if you don't pursue college right out of high school, I would highly encourage you to pursue college later in life, because I think you'd be really good at it. You'd be really good at mastering the learning process, for sure. But yeah, I think that's it. I think we have. I think I've said all I need to say about Tyler's chart. Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate you. Tyler submitted from TikTok. Love TikTok. Such a fun app. Okay, 2 more charts. 2 more charts, and how much time do I have? 2 more charts and 15 minutes to go. Okay, Melissa, darling, it's time to talk about your chart. Let's take a peek. So we have Melissa born at 12:45 p.m. in Phoenix. So I was just bitching about the South Node conjoined everything, but this time Melissa decided to shake it up and she's put the North Node on the ascendant. Hilarious! Oh my god. So we have some really strong Virgo placements here. The ascendant in Virgo, the North Node in Virgo, and Mars in Virgo all conjoin the North Node in the 1st house of self. The ruler of the chart is also this Mercury in Taurus in the 9th. Melissa, speaking of scholastic environments, you would do very well in a scholastic environment. Mercury in Taurus I enjoy seeing because it's somebody who has, yes, that mental stubbornness that Taurus has, but Mercury in Taurus slows down that Mercury. It really requires Mercury to be more deliberate, more detail-oriented, and I think Mercury in Taurus is the perfect complement to all of this Virgo energy, because it represents somebody who's a really hard worker, somebody who's naturally going to be very specific, but also very deliberate about what they are and how they operate in the world, and I'm a huge fan of that. Okay. I see it. I see it. Wow, honey. Wow. Okay. So Moon in Cancer, Mercury Cancer in the 11th. Melissa is such a mom friend. Having the Moon in Cancer is one thing, but having Venus in Cancer in the 11th, this is such a big marker for somebody with a bleeding heart for the community, the tribe, the social group dynamic, somebody who's very humanitarian. It's just somebody who has this Cancer maternal instinct to the nth degree, who really just bleeds gold. Like it's such a compassionate placement and such a nurturing and tending placement. I think that's really beautiful. However, as we continue to look at the chart, I think that it's important to understand that Melissa's starting to give me these chameleon vibes, because we've got Virgo and Mercury ruling the chart. We've also got 2 really strong Cancer placements, and then the Sun in Gemini up in the 10th. Also being ruled by that Mercury in the 9th. I think that one of Melissa's strengths is her ability to conform, her ability to blend into the background and kind of mirror that chameleon where she's able to touch all these different tasks and topics and basically just become whatever it is she's touching, and to blend in really, really well so that she's not a threat, but she can also get her work done. And I think that that's strategically very, very smart. However, it does clarify why that North Node is in the first house. I think, Melissa, one of your strengths is adaptation, but one of your weaknesses is also adaptation, because here we're really trying to get you to form a personality. We're really trying to get you to form a sense of self. We're really trying to get your self-esteem to increase. We're really trying to get you to be your own person, to be very independent, and to stand on your own. And I think that that's something that, unfortunately, all of these placements, they're too accommodating, is a good way to say it. And I'd really like you to be a little bit more aware of the promise that you made to yourself, and how you said, this go around, I'm really going to make it about me. And not in a bad way, but being of service requires a you that is of service, right? You are not how you care for others, you are a person caring for others, and there's a difference between that. And that's something that Virgo and Cancer both really, really get lost in, is this idea of, oh, if I just love them hard enough. Yeah, it never goes that way. Never goes that way. Let's see, what else? What else? We have Jupiter in Aquarius being ruled by the Saturn in Aries in the 8th. I'm not really a super fan of you going out on your own and doing business ventures. I think that you'd find, like, there's such a frustration when it comes to the work environment, because we know you can do it better, Melissa. We know, we get it. Like, you're just so overqualified with all these things. You're so detail-oriented, like you can master any skill in 2 seconds. Like, we get it, and that can get really frustrating really quickly. However, do not make the mistake of thinking that you could do better on your own, because there are markers in the chart that although you are very good at details, and although you are very good at managing, you don't really have these super strong cardinal placements that I would like you to have in order to nourish a foundation in solid business. I think that really the money in your chart as well is attached to you caring for social groups and the 11th house of friendships. I think that it's more about you managing other people's messes instead of you trying to create a mess and manage it yourself. I think that's where you're going to run into trouble with this Saturn in Aries in the 8th, being ruled by the Mars and Virgo in the 1st. So that's just something to keep in mind, Melissa. Your chameleon tendencies are really, really powerful, but at the same time, if you don't have a background, to conform to, then all of these placements in your chart are going to fail. They're going to not necessarily be able to conform because there's nothing to conform to. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you donating your chart. And then we have one more chart, and we will be at an hour. Let's talk about Amber. So Amber was born 11:02 a.m. in Huntington Park. Let's take a peek. When I tell you that we have another South Node conjoin the Ascendant, I really don't, I wouldn't believe me at this point, but here it is. Here it is. South Node in Leo on the Ascendant in the 1st house of Self. Cannot make this up, ladies and gentlemen. Cannot make this up. Ridiculous. I'm done. Okay. So, interesting. Jupiter in Cancer, honey, you put the most positive planet in your chart in the 12th house of karmic healing. Obviously, you came here to do some very, very deep internal work. Saturn in Capricorn, Moon in Capricorn, Neptune in Capricorn, Uranus in Capricorn. Everything's retrograde except for the Moon in that house. You've been having a really crappy work year, honey. really crappy with all these, I mean, past couple years, but really it's Pluto right now is directly over your Saturn. There are some major transits that are not okay for you right now. But they are going to make you better. I mean, the sun in Taurus at 23 degrees is making a trine to the Saturn. I think that there is a method to the madness, and there is a lot of madness, but there is a method to it. We just need to make sure that you don't emotionally shut down and start to wall off your heart, because this moon in Capricorn in the 6th has a tendency to be so rigidly focused on the job that's being done. It's a zero fun placement, and that's actually something that I'm seeing a lot in your chart. Is you've decided to put the sun, who is naturally radiant, in the fixed earth sign of Taurus. Like, again, you know, these relaxation tendencies are nice, but they tend to be when trining all the other earthy placements, like, it's about the success, it's about the climb, it's about, you know, achievement, it's about go, must do, must have, must reach, and, you know, there's very little capability of flexibility in the chart, and I'm not really a super fan of that. Some of the most flexible, gushy planets that we would have, like Mercury, you've put in Taurus and you've put him retrograde. Venus, who is naturally very lovely, you've put in Aries, the sign of her fall, in the 9th. Like, you've taken and Jupiter in Cancer, the most positive planet in your chart, you've thrown into the 12th house of hidden enemies and karmic healing. Like, you really decided this time around that it was going to be a no nonsense journey, and I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because I would really like to remind you that, and I know that you have valid things that you're running from, and I know that you have, there's this piece of you with this Jupiter, or this Pluto and Scorpio retrograde in the 4th. There is this piece of you that fears a lot what happened at home and what happens in the subconscious. But at the same time, you know, you can't work hard enough to escape that journey. And I think that the more you surrender to your own healing process, and remember that, you know, healing is supposed to be fun, and this life is supposed to have a certain sense of ease to it. I would highly recommend working through the Abraham Hicks material, because their message of effortless creation is something that I think is definitely needed in your charts, which is so fixed on this idea of hard work equals progress, right? For you, we really need to soften your edges and make sure that all of these placements that we're seeing in your chart, Amber, have breathing room, have the ability to vent, have the ability to be creative, and have all of this lovely expression of all these earth placements and all of this kind of fixed success rise that you've decided to kind of bring into the workforce of your life. But, you know, you also promised yourself that you would be here to find a stable relationship with this North Node in Aquarius. And yes, it will be somebody who you will work with, and yes, it will be somebody who you will likely find through your work environment, and or who is a healthcare practitioner who might be able to help you on your own healing journey. But at the same time, the idea of you coming in guns a-blazing and shovels a-digging with all of this need to strive towards this imaginary goal that really doesn't even exist, I think is a little bit of an interesting dynamic for you to learn how to soften in this life. Like, there is such a thing as being too productive. Yeah, and we do need to embrace Taurus's secondary quality of rest and laziness to a certain degree. And I know that that's, like, lazy is the ultimate turnoff for you, and I get that. But we also need to respect that if we don't have a rest cycle, then this is what happens in the body. If somebody trains too hard, yeah, and their rest cycle and their hormone recovery process is slighted, then their body goes into failure. That's what your chart is at risk of. So we really need to work on making sure that we're balancing the fight with the fun, is a good way to say it, Amber, and that we really remind you of the promise that yes, work needs to be done and you should be working very hard, but you should also be playing and resting as hard as you work, because this intensity is not sustainable for long periods. Like, you could, but you would also die, and we don't want you dying just yet. So please take it easy on yourself, Amber. Okay. Excellent. And we are just at about an hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for another round of the Astro-Babble. We are done with our 8 charts. If you or someone you know, like, and trust would like to be on the live stream, please feel free to private message me with birth dates, places, and times. I do need consent from those who are not yourself, but I do read for children. We have pets that we've had on the live stream. But yes, submit, because I do need more names. I'll probably be doing a post over the next couple days to ask for more chart information, because we are getting a little low. And check out my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, if you would like to have a consultation with me or research doing some astrology classes with me. And in the meantime, may the stars be ever in your favor.